There was a young woman called Kay who lived with her parents and grandmother. The grandmother used to be a kind lady, but ever since she became bedridden a few years back, her personality had changed completely, and she began to make constant complaints and snide remarks to Kay's mother, who looked after her. Her grandmother would often say, "I know you are all hoping I die soon." Her family got fed up listening to these words that they finally began to really hope that the grandmother would die soon. Gradually, the family began to take less and less care of the grandmother, and the quality of food got worse, and as a result, she became rapidly weaker as days went by. Now, she couldn't move at all, but became only a thing that breathed in the bed. It was obvious to anyone that she didn't have long to live. Now, Kay's room was on the second floor, and one night when she was sleeping in there, she heard a car horn suddenly blast outside. Kay tried to ignore it, but a moment later it blasted again. The horn kept sounding that she finally gave up trying to sleep and angrily drew the curtain back to take a look outside, wondering who could be doing something so antisocial at this time of night. What she saw made her shudder. There was a hearse parked in front of her house. She couldn't be sure whether it had people in it or not, and the engine didn't seem to be running. It was very still. Kay got scared, ran back to bed, and pulled the duvet over her head. She kept trembling, but nothing more happened afterwards, and it was very quiet throughout the rest of the night. When the morning came, Kay asked her parents whether they heard the car horn last night. They said no. It was hard to believe that the sound, as loud as it was, could go unnoticed, but they didn't look like they were lying, nor was there any reason that they should lie. She wondered then if the hearse came for her grandmother, which was the only possible explanation left. Her grandmother was, however, still, quote-unquote, fine. That night, there was another visit from the hearse, and the night after that as well. Kay tried to ignore it at first, but for some strange reason, the horn didn't stop blasting unless Kay looked at the hearse from her bedroom window. Night after night, the same thing happened, that Kay was becoming very nervous from fear and dread. On the seventh night, since all this started, Kay's parents had to go out for the day. Kay wanted to go with them, but someone had to stay in for the grandmother. Also, because they knew that Kay had been mentally unstable, they half forced her to stay at home and went out by themselves. In an attempt to force fear out of her mind, Kay did things like watching comedy programs on TV as much as possible. She was afraid to go near her grandmother's room and didn't even take a lunch to her, although it was her task to do so. Her parents had said they would be home in the late afternoon, but the night came and there was still no sign of them coming back. Soon it was past midnight, and the time when the hearse usually appeared was drawing closer and closer, but nothing was to be heard from her parents, not even one quick phone call. Then she heard the familiar sound of the horn outside. Kay was downstairs at the time, but she didn't dare to see it up close and went upstairs to see it from her bedroom as usual. But what she saw from the window wasn't the usual scene. From inside the hearse, which had normally parked still, some men in black suits got out, and they were now passing through the gate. Kay was totally freaked out. Soon she heard the doorbell ring downstairs. The doorbell kept ringing for a while, until it was replaced by light knockings that soon became louder and more urgent. Bang, 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 bang. Kay felt she was going to die from sheer terror. A thought came into her head that maybe she had forgotten to lock the front door. The more she thought, the more she became sure that she had forgotten to lock it. Kay jumped up and ran downstairs at full speed. But seconds before she could reach the front door, the phone at the bottom of the stairs started ringing. The banging at the door still continued. Kay couldn't move. All she wanted to do was press her hands to her ears and scream. But instead, she managed to grab the handset. Hello? 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 Hello, is this Mrs. Blank's number? It was a surprisingly soft voice of a man. This is the police. I want you to stay calm and listen. A while ago, Mr. and Mrs. Blank have met a tragic accident and passed away. I gather you are the daughter, aren't you? Hello? Hello? Kay was too stunned to say or do anything. Strangely, the persistent banging had suddenly come to stop. Kay started thinking, Maybe the hearse had to come to take her parents away, not her grandmother. Actually, was her grandmother okay? It was then that Kate felt someone tap on her shoulder. Kate turned around and her grandmother, who was thought unable to move on her own, was standing right behind her. And Kate's grandmother smiled to her and said, "You are coming too." My friend had a motorbike accident and he was in a hospital until just recently. The hospital was large, quite old, but known for having cutting-edge equipment, and we have never heard any bad rumors about it. My friend could just be making the whole thing up, lol. My friend damaged his collarbone in the accident, but it was only a light scar, though he needed an operation, and he was told he would be out and about within a week. This happened apparently 2 days before he was discharged. If you have ever stayed in a hospital, you know how early they turn the lights off at night. Each bed, however, is usually equipped with a lamp that gives off enough light for reading. My friend was reading a comic book under such a lamp when he felt the call of nature. Not pee, but the other one. He got up from the bed and put his feet in slippers and went out into the corridor. A corridor at night in hospital sounds spooky, but in reality, he said, it was not that bad. Because there was still some light, and also because he was a bit hyper thinking he would be out of this place in 2 days. It was very quiet, but that was all. My friend reached the lavatory and went into one of the cubicles. After he had finished his business, he kept on reading the comic book in the cubicle, without wiping down there, lol. When he heard a patter of footsteps going down the corridor. Just as he thought, someone is coming here, the footsteps stopped in front of the lavatory. And then, "Are you alright?" a nurse asked him. So my friend replied, "I'm alright, thank you." He heard the nurse leave, the patter of footsteps gradually fading into distance. My friend went back to reading the comic book. About 5 minutes had passed when he again heard those same footsteps, which again stopped in front of the lavatory, and a nurse's voice said, "You are taking a long time. Are you really alright?" My friend replied, "Oh, I'm really fine. I'm gonna finish soon." The nurse said, "Okay." He was quite impressed about the nurse's caring attitude. He again went back to reading. A while later, this time from inside the lavatory, he heard a voice saying, "Are you really alright?" He got a fright because he didn't hear any footsteps this time and didn't expect her to come inside the lavatory. And he was getting rather annoyed by the constant questioning, so he said rather harshly, "I'm really fine, and if you didn't already know, this place is the men's toilet." No reply came from the nurse and a dead silence followed. He thought, "Oops, maybe that was too harsh," and opened his mouth to apologize when the door went bang. My friend cried out and looked up, and in the gap between the door and the ceiling there was a woman looking down at him who said, "Are you really alright?" My friend, terrified and desperate to run away, banged the door open, but the nurse was not there anymore. He ran back to his room but couldn't sleep the whole night. But he was okay the next day and safely got out of the hospital. He also told me that when he thought about it later, each voice seemed to be different from the last, and the final voice sounded the deepest of all. This is an unbelievable story that really happened to me. It all happened when I was 15 years old. I was living with my mom, dad, and my little brother. On the New Year's Eve, after we finished watching TV, I went to bed hoping to have a nice dream, but instead I had a nightmare. I can't remember the content of the dream, and woke up quite suddenly during the night. I could hear my heart beating very fast and my whole body was drenched in cold sweat as if someone had poured water down my back. I sat bolt upright on my bed and stayed that way for a while. This is just great, a nightmare on the New Year's Day, I thought with irritation, and as I didn't feel like going back to sleep straight away, I went to the sitting room to get a drink. We had a refrigerator in there. And when I entered the sitting room, somehow all my family were there sitting on the sofa, huddled together in front of the TV. Even though it was well past midnight, I didn't check the clock, but it was probably around 2 in the morning. Also, there were usually no programs on TV around that time of night, but they were showing some news. This part is also vague on it. What's more, there was no sound coming from the TV, and every single window was open wide, leaving the room as freezing as the outside. Obviously, something strange was going on. I went cold all over. What the hell are you all doing? What's got into your heads? Trembling, I yelled at them. Then my little brother replied, but, the voice was too quiet to make it out, and he started crying. When my parents saw that, they shut all the windows and turned off the TV, all the while not speaking a single word and showing no emotion on their faces, and they gestured to my little brother who was still crying like they wanted him to go to bed, and they all went back to their bedrooms. Witnessing such a creepy incident on the very first day of the new year disturbed me, and I no longer felt like sleeping. I stayed up until the morning reading a comic book in my room. In the morning, I asked my parents what they were doing in the middle of the night, and they both looked at me like, "What the hell are you talking about?" There was a huge difference between the disbelieving faces I saw then and the emotionless faces I saw the night before that I became a bit panicky, thinking, was that ghosting that I saw last night? Well, I knew my friends wouldn't believe me if I told them, and as I had just been dumped by my girlfriend in the previous month, I concluded that I saw hallucinations due to stress. Some days later, I again woke up during the night because of a nightmare. This time, I sort of remembered what had happened in the dream, and it was about getting hit on the back of my head. Strangely, even after I woke up, my head still hurt, and somehow I was thinking nonsense like, I will be safe in the convenience store. I also got obsessed with the thought, I've been attacked by a ghost, and in a panic, ran to the sitting room but no one was there. The room smelt like something had been burning in it, maybe because we'd had some meat for supper. And remembering the strange incident that happened in the room on the New Year's Day, I ended up spending a sleepless night yet again. And then around the beginning of February, my body started to itch all over. I thought at first I had a dry skin condition, but I felt a strange burning sensation, especially around my back and head, and I kept scratching at these places. It seemed to only get worse, and I went to the dermatologist and got some ointment. I was going to rub it on after bath when my brother said, "Can I do it for you?" I showed my back to him, but suddenly he hit me with his palm really hard in the middle of my back. It hurt so much that I shouted angrily at him, saying, "Bugger off." My little brother always cried when I shouted at him, so very soon his eyes became watery. Just when I thought, oh, he's gonna cry, tears started streaming down his cheeks. Then strangely, his face sort of began to lose its color, and in the end, he was crying, but without any expression on his face. It was so creepy, and when I looked at my parents, they too were crying without expression. Now I was totally lost. When I looked at them closely, they seemed like they were trying to say something to me, but I couldn't understand what. Was about all I could make out. Just then, everything around me turned red, and gradually it faded into sepia color, and I felt my consciousness leaving me. That was what I thought, but the next moment I found myself transported to a completely different place. But the place, however, was familiar to me, and after some hard thinking, I recognized it as my cousin's house. My uncle was looking down at me with a worried face. Huh? How did I get here? I didn't know what was going on. Soon people started coming into the room. I made a guess that up until then everything had been a dream, but I didn't understand why I was in my uncle's house, or why my grandparents were there, or why I was bandaged everywhere. I began to panic. Maybe we shouldn't tell him anything because he doesn't remember what happened, I heard my granddad say. But my uncle replied, but we must tell him. The offender hasn't been caught, and the police is going to come and ask questions. Then, my uncle told me everything. Someone set fire on my house on the 1st of January, and the house got completely burnt down. I survived by pure chance because I was in a convenience store at the time when the house was set on fire, but it seemed I encountered that arsonist after all, and I was attacked with a kind of bat and got hit on the back of my head and back, and on many other places on my body, which resulted in loss of memory. After the attack, I was immediately admitted to the hospital, and for some time my life hung in balance. When I got better, I was moved to my uncle's house, and now it was already March. For the last 2 months, I suffered amnesia and had been undergoing rehabilitation, and it seemed only now I had recovered my memories. I cried and cried because I lost all the important things in my life, and I had spent the whole 2 months not knowing it. My grandparents were looking at me with pained expressions. My uncle just looked away, but my grandparents finally began to cry as well, and we just kept crying together. My body was covered with bruises. I was bandaged like a mummy, and every time I bent my limbs, a stinging pain went through me. The windows, which were somehow wide open on a cold winter night, my family huddled together on the sofa with expressionless faces. The nightmare in which I was hit by a strange man, everything around me turning red, and all things now fitted together like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. The arsonist hadn't been found, and when they took my bandage off, there was one place on my bruised back which was left unscarred, and it was in the shape of a small hand. It has been 5 years since the incident occurred, and as my bruises began to fade, so did the handprint. I'm sorry this story was too long and badly written. The memories of the incident will stay with me forever. The story itself may not be scary, but I think the fact that the arsonist is still at large is very scary, at least for me. Thank you for reading my story.
Sinister V's, sinister voices. Yo. Action-packed Black Mac 10, Jr. and his friend, not a pot to piss and starving brothers on a mission. 2:30, brilliant plan around the tow booth, GW Bridge, got the weapon concealed, nothing to lose. They choose to break the rules at all costs, stick them in Jersey. Hit the other side to New York, black and red leather suits and black biker boots. One got the gun, the other one controls the motorbike. Adrenaline pumping, dreams of cash. Anybody try to stop them getting lead in their face, believe that. Black Pack.